Hey everyone, I'm Dustin Steiner with Tilmor, and today we're going to be talking about lifting plastic, more so the questions we often get asked prior to a purchase or after a purchase. And we're going to be talking with Doug here specifically because Doug he's our service manager, but you take sales calls also, so you get to kind of see the whole spectrum of questions that we receive oftentimes. And what better time to do it than right now, which is kind of plastic lifting season. And so we're just going to jump right in. If you have questions, definitely ask them along the way because this is the perfect time to do it. We've done some overview stuff on the plastic lifter before, but this is going to be more on questions that are pretty common for us to receive. So, Doug, first off, just right into it. What will this fit my tractor?
Well, sure. Well, I say sure. Let me qualify that because this was originally designed for a Tilmor tractor. So Tilmor has a belly mount where we would attach these plastic lifters and then we would put the winder on the rear of the tractor. But we found that this combo unit was actually very effective working together. And so the Tilmor tractor, back to your question, is a 22 horsepower tractor. So it's made for low horsepower tractor, and you know, anything, these pins here, 3-point hitch is category 1, so you know, you could use easily use 40-50 horsepower tractor, but more than that is overkill for a system like this.
So you can use it on a smaller. I know we've had some customers use the lifters on something like a G, the lifters and the winder on something like a Cub. So you know, those are very small horsepower machines. So you mentioned a larger horsepower tractor. What's the potential challenge or downside to using it on a larger horsepower tractor?
Yeah, so if it's on a larger horsepower tractor, and especially if you were just using the lifters by themselves on the rear of a tractor, if these angled blades will definitely suck down, as you know, if you have no depth control, they'll just keep going down until the limit, and it causes a lot of force on there. We've seen actually bent parts that, you know, that you can overdo it. So we on this plastic lifter combo, we've included this gauge wheel that will set the depth so that you're only going down to a certain level. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit too.
Good. Another one we often receive, or oftentimes we find out after the fact, it's late, maybe a little bit late, but when should you look at removing your plastic? When's the best time?
Yeah, that's a great question because we get people that like to leave plastic in for more than one season, and that, if anyone has ever lifted plastic by hand especially, you know it's not an easy job. And so the best time to lift it is after the season you're done, and when your debris has dried out somewhat. And we can discuss a little bit too about this, but if you have, you know, vines are particularly troublesome for lifting plastic, or tall plants. So going through with a chopper or even a mower to cut off the roots, you know, you don't want to get into the plastic, where a lot of times with mowers, you know, there can be some suction, but choppers or something that will shred your debris, and then just let it dry out just a bit.
And yeah, drying out. Okay, yeah. So you can lift it when the crop is green, but sometimes drying out helps to stuff to crack off better, to allow it to feed through better, right?
Right. One problematic situation, for example, corn has a lot of debris, you know, the leaves, the fodder. If it's green and conditions are wet, can create a really gummy glob that tend to plug up their blades. So the best time it's when it's a little bit drier. We don't always have that you know, ability to go out when it's perfectly dry, but that's the best time if you have that window of opportunity to lift plastic.
Good. What's one, like, one of the things we actually get often is we'll just work on my 5-foot plastic. So we do a lot with 3 and 4-foot plastic, but will it work with a larger plastic?
Sure, yeah. So the blades here are designed so that you can move them outward and inward. You can actually straddle this part here, and a lot of times when we have it with 4-foot plastic, this piece here is right about in here in this location. So you can make that adjustment. Your objective with setting those blades is, once again, get my drawing, we just want to get under the edge of the plastic, really, so that, you know, where you set it on your toolbar, you know, it determines where this will be. So it may vary somewhat whether you have 3-foot, 4-foot, 5-foot plastic, but our objective is just to get under this edge of the plastic that's buried. And yeah, so you've got that adjustment there.
And we'll talk about in a little bit kind of some of the challenges if you're not quite dialed in like that, or if you have the blades angled a little bit, what that might or might not do.
Yeah, so when you get it, probably the easiest thing to do is set it in this mid-range. You have the ability to tilt different angles, but start in the mid-range and see, you know, how well the material is flowing through. And the blades turn, but don't be surprised if you see them stall or not turn. They still have that ability to just get under, fracture that soil, and loosen the dirt that's on top, and then the lifter will pull it up through.
So you're kind of jumping ahead, but let's move into that piece, because one of the questions is kind of what if I have grass on the edge of my bed? So a lot of the videos that we show are not perfect condition beds. It's not saying that it'll do everything, but it's also to show that reality is it can do a pretty good job in different situations. But what is that situation that if someone's got grass on the edge of their bed, how does stuff work? How doesn't it work?
These notch blades do a really good job of cutting that sort of sod mass, root mass, and you know that will roll up through here. Loose soil, that's usually the condition where you might not even see the blade turn. But the grass, you know, if you maintain the edge of the bed during the season, which we also have some tools for, you know, edge of plastic, finger weeders, then lifting becomes much easier at the end of the season. And so we encourage that, but it also will cut through that root mass, and it does pretty well with that.
I think it's a little bit if it cuts through it and you got a thick layer of sod, you know, if you got clay soil that gets really gummy and it wants to stick on the edge there, it'll cut through it, but whether still everything wants to kind of just set down, it can make it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you said, you kind of alluded to there, but you kind of said earlier, was the blades don't always, they may or may not turn depending on the soil types conditions. So looser type soils, it might actually carry a little bit more. You don't want it just to be carrying a ton of soil, but it's still gonna do its job, even if it's not, you know, it's cutting in underneath there. It might require a little bit more horsepower if it's not rotating, and that's part of the rotating design of that with the notched disc blades. It does a good job for low horsepower tractors. If you're just dragging blades through, you're going to have to maybe have a little bit more, more horsepower.
And you mentioned about 5-foot plastic. Well, that is in particular why this gathering unit was put together with 4-foot plastic, and you'll recognize these if you got an earlier unit or even one now that's crated up. These were the guides that we would install onto this bar, but we found with 5-foot plastic, they would, when the plastic would hang down, it would create problems with these fingers. So this is an over center piece so that when when you're ready to take the roll off, you can move that like Dustin did.
You just press that down and you can collapse all of these pieces there.
Pull that roll off. So what was happening is it would squeeze this finger, this would collapse, and then you could not pull off that roll.
Yeah, all the plastic, because it's so wide, it wasn't containing it, it would come to here. So that's part of the reason for that newer kind of containment system.
Yeah, so this does a really good job now of centering up the plastic roll right in the middle of your reel, and keeps it all nice and consolidated here, so when you do decide to pull your levers, it just slides off. And there we have some videos that show that.
And where, along with that, Doug, especially considering wider plastic, but where does this need to be running? Where does your you know, that's part of it too. Well, you could run on the bed, you could run on this way off the side, but where's the ideal place to be operating that wheel?
Yeah.
Because this is ground driven.
Right.
That's the other benefit to lower horsepower tractors. You don't have electrical, you don't have hydraulics, anything that have to be running this. It's a completely ground driven system. But where does it go?
Yeah, so that should go right at the edge of your bed, sort of off to the side. I'll refer to my picture here again. So here's your plastic. The wheel will be coming off onto the right side in the rear. Right along there in this location is about where your wheel needs to sit. Now, if you have 3-foot plastic or 4-foot plastic, 5, there's a little bit of flexibility, but the idea here is this: there are a couple of holes, different holes, where you can locate your reel. Farther in, farther out. We're moved over a little bit here. So,
and you're talking about on this shaft here.
On this shaft here, it can be moved a couple different places.
And that's to try to help center up the roll that's going on.
Exactly, depending on the type of roll. But with this guide, your objective is to try to locate your plastic right sort of in the middle of the roll, or the reel here. Yeah, so ground driven wheel at the kind of the bottom of the edge of the bed.
Good. Well, so we've talked about different plastics a little bit, but how thick should the plastic be?
Yeah, good question, because that really has an impact on how much work it is to lift plastic. We have 1 mil that we commonly use. Where you might consider going thicker, 1.2 or more, is if you have crops that are, you know, with rows that are and plants that are closely spaced, where you have many holes, that tends to weaken the plastic. And our reel has good tension on it, so you want to keep that clutch system right there, Dustin's got his hand on, fairly tight, enough that the plastic is taut when you're winding it, and it has the ability to slip. This is a belt-driven wheel or reel here, so it has the ability to slip if as the wheel gets bigger, or your roll gets bigger. And
part of keeping it taut too is for debris shedding too, because if especially if you get a lot of debris coming up through here and it's not falling off, it'll want to sag and get caught in here, and it's not going to want to wind it as well. So you want to keep it nice and taut. And to do that, when you've got 3 rows of beans that are closely planted together, you just think about pulling 2 different ends away, and you have all those holes inside of it. It's going to want to rip apart a lot easier. That's where a heavier mill can be a good idea.
Yeah, and so to mention one thing, this bar, the tool bar, actually serves to kind of to rake off the debris as its plastic is being pulled up in the middle here. So your plastic will go down through here.
So that really does a pretty good job compared to the other ones at removing debris. So that new system does a really good job at keeping that, so you can have a nice taut. You get a really nice tight roll.
Yeah.
And so for just getting rid of it, when you got to dispose of it, it's a lot easier to handle. It's
so much easier. It's so much easier than having a big mound or, it's. So yeah. Go ahead.
I think So I think from the plastic thickness standpoint, I remember one of the times we had a thinner plastic, and we went to someone's farm, a lot of debris on it. They had beans, they had 3 rows that were pretty closely planted, and they just vined right over the plastic, and we cut them as low as we could with the mower, but those things just ripping little tiny slits in the plastic as you go, and you're pulling it up, and we'd get a decent run, and then it would break, and then we'd get another run and break, or we might get a really short run, and it just it was a frustrating kind of process. The other situation where you may want to think about a heavier mill is if you want to keep it out longer too, if you're doing multiple seasons, because if you use a thinner mill, by the end of 2 seasons, you're dealing with shreds at that point. That's not a very fun thing to do. So
yeah, another thing that can affect it, animals, deer especially, they walk across it, and so you've got this area that easily torn. Sometimes you can do it with one person if you have plastic that is held together. Other times when it's tearing, you just need somebody in the back to help wrap it up and keep it going.
That's the importance of timely removal of it, because the longer you have it out there in our area, the deer are going to go all over it, and you're going to have all sorts of additional holes that you didn't before. But that also runs very good into the next question about drip tape. People ask, well, can it remove drip tape? Some people, they're just specifically for this, just want to remove drip tape by itself. But buried or not, how does this do with removing drip tape?
Yeah, it does very well, and actually pulling up the drip tape, winding the drip tape at the same time is an advantage, because what it does is create sort of like a tent with the plastic as you're pulling it up, and that helps to shed the debris. So it does a very good job. Even buried, typically we've buried 2-3 inches, and it's never had a problem. Now, I know when you get down into tighter soils, if you're burying at 6 inches, that could be another factor. But I haven't seen any problem at all, with 2-3 inch drip tape, or buried 2 to 3 inches.
Good. So we kind of hit majority of these. We kind of about 2 left, and this one we kind of already hit already. But kind of, should I remove my crop plant debris before the plastic? So that's a question that we receive, or people oftentimes don't really want to have to remove it, and so they ask that question, sometimes knowing what the answer probably is. But we'll kind of what's your response to that, Doug?
Yeah, that especially vines and taller crops, that they need to be at least mown down or chopped in some way. That's got it for the plastic to be able to pull up through.
That's kind of most of them, but one of the last one is kind of, what are some of the typical adjustments? How do you set it up? Because we have instructions for assembly of everything, But what do you do after that standpoint? You've asked maybe a lot of the questions that you've heard now to us in the sales process. You've received it. Now what do I do? What's the best way to get this thing dialed in for my setup?
So probably the first thing to consider after you have these, we talked about these, the width, and is this angle here with your top link. So on your tractor, it's connected, your bottom, your 3-point lift arms, your top link, you can use that then to adjust the down pressure that's on your rear drive wheel. And that also has an impact on your front blades. So if you, for example, are too short on your top link, your blades may be at too much of an angle and you don't have enough pressure on the back wheel for the reel to spin. So you have to make sure you lengthen this top link so that you have good down pressure on your back drive wheel and your reel is spinning. That's probably the most critical. Then, of course, setting your gauge wheel. You want your gauge wheel set once again, so you're just getting the edge of the plastic sort of under the tip of the blade, sort of in this area. Go as shallow as you can. I think that's probably the rule of thumb, just to go as shallow as you can, just so that the soil is being fractured and the plastic's coming up. You don't need to go any deeper than that.
Are your blades supposed to be lifting plastic out of the soil, or what are your blades supposed to be doing?
Really, the function of the blades is just to loosen the soil that's at the edge of the blade. You won't see the plastic in the air. The winder is what is lifting. And having these, in close proximity, you can see it work well. The plastic, by coming together, by being pulled together, it's already starting to shed all the soil and debris that's collecting at the edge. You'll notice we don't actually have them on this unit, but there's a little shield that, well, it's more of just a debris guard. Sometimes they get in the way of the debris and aren't always, and it's an optional piece.
Got one sitting over here. I might as well bring it over.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Try not to cut myself. Oh. You're talking about this piece right
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah. So this was originally designed just to keep all the debris from, coming back around into the blade, but occasionally it will get in the way. So we'll just say that's optional. We've got this back piece on here, that's the up part, just to protect you from getting your shin on it. But
that piece here isn't quite as important for the rear setups, because we as much put it there for the Tilmor, any mid-mount setups, because it's right where the operator gets on, and it's just intended to help. Again, these are sharp, so try to protect your shins a little bit. Honestly, in the situation of if you got a lot of debris, junk on the edge of your beds, and you're doing it on the rear mount like that, that's another thing that you could, if you're collecting stuff here, you may want to play with removing that too. It just depends what your situation is. If you keep the edges clean, it's not going to be an issue.
Right.
Keep it on. The other thing I tend to recommend too is when you're first doing it, I would probably just put the gauge wheel the whole way up until you figure out your kind of depth and your pitch as you're dealing your top link on your machine, and that way you have nothing fighting you, because it's easy to kind of forget that's there when you're trying to get these in, or else you're just fighting yourself. So if you pull that out, go a little bit until you get these dialed right where you want, this working how it needs to go, then drop your gauge wheel in, so every time you turn around and drop it back in, it's consistent every time. I say that, but again, on your larger machines, these are going to want to suck down in. So a larger machine's not going to hardly feel it. It's just going to keep pulling it, and it will, there are other great plastic winders for bigger machines, lifters for bigger machines, and so this can work. There's other good options too, but if you're using this, just make sure you're getting your good depth control.
Right. This is we'll say, inexpensive option. There are hydraulic units out there, but this really does a good job when everything is tuned in.
Yeah, it's a simple option that doesn't. Again, there's not a lot of tuning that has to be done, but it's again, yeah, the lack of hydraulics, things like that, make it really simple to just really last year after year, season after season. So I don't know. Are there any questions there that you've seen? Anything else that we missed, Doug?
I think we've covered most of it. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call here at Tilmor. We speak Spanish too here, so if anybody has any issues with the unit, either before or after purchase, give us a call.
Yeah, and if you have an older one, give us a call as well if you're interested in this piece here.
Yeah.
It's just a bolt-on piece, just like everything else. So you may find that the other pieces worked great for what you were doing, and that's awesome. If you feel like you want something to get a little more tighter rolls or to prevent it from getting into the levers there, we do have that available. So give us a call. Any other questions, post them here, or send us a social media post or whatever, and we'd be happy to help you out. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.